at 3:11 a.m. My phone sprayed the bedroom ceiling with cold blue and told me I no longer own my van. The Oregon DMV email thanked me for a completed electronic title transfer from my name to a company called River City Tows LLC, time-stamped to 5:57 a.m., with a pickup appointment scheduled for 8:00 a.m. that might own curb. My signature, my exact slanting R, and the lazy underline I've made since high school floated under a sentence that read like a dare. We live in a brown craftsman on SE 15th in the Silvermullen neighborhood of Portland. The house leans a little like it prefers one hip, the kitchen windows rattle and the MAX clacks over the bridge. The front room is my workshop and warehouse because e-commerce doesn't care if Sawdust wants to be a roommate. I sell reclaimed wood shelves and refurbished turntables online and take small renovation jobs. When orders thin out, mudroom built-ins and woodstock, a cedar bench installation off Hawthorne, the occasional pantry reface in St. John's for people who think open shelving means personality. My wife, Maura, is an ICU nurse at oHSU. A schedule looks like a cruel crossword. Days turned into nights, shift swaps loved in chronos, last-minute texts that put her on the tram to Markham Hill while I'm brewing coffee I'd drink alone. Money moved like a draft under our back door. In October, a catalytic converter disappeared from under my transfer connect with the furtive efficiency everyone warned me about. Insurance side uncovered most, but not the parts haul. In November, I carried a stress EKG home from Kaiser and a co-insurance bill that turned my toothbrush into a ledger. In December, the property tax reassessment made our mailbox look like a brick. January, clients asked if friendship qualified them for a discount. February had a leak in it. When I woke to a government email about a title transfer that would make deliveries theoretical, it felt almost obvious, like the punchline to a joke I hadn't been present for. The DMV email had an attachment with a DocuSign certificate. The IP address jail located within 3 blocks of the south waterfront. The notary stamp belonged to a service called Notarized Now. The audit trail insisted a 2-factor code had been sent to my phone at 2:54 a.m. I checked my messages, no code. I checked my email, nothing like one. The signature on the form matched mine with the eerie confidence of someone who has practiced. Dropped down where I had listed my lien holder months earlier now showed in /A. The pickup instructions suggested leaving keys in the glove compartment and a copy of a driver's license on the dash for verification. I sat up and the old mattress springs reported the movement like snitches. In the ring app, the last clip showed Mark coming home at 12:42 a.m. with her hair yanked into a knot and her navy fleece zipped to her throat, a white flat envelope tucked under her elbow. The next clip showed her going out at 1:18 with only her keys and the same envelope, then coming back at 2:33 with a small reusable bag from New Seasons on woodstock and a single red rose of all things peeking out like a jerk. At 2:59, a car idled for 20 seconds at our curb and then moved on. The porch light blinked because the bulb is proud when people pay attention to it. I printed everything because paper is a sedative for people like me. I made a stack on the dining table, the DMV notice, the DocuSign certificate, screenshots of the ring timestamps, a copy of my last legitimate title from the glove books, 3 credit-freeze confirmations because you never know which bureau thinks you're the easiest. I moved $7,200 from our joint account at On Point Credit Union into my business checking at Advantage, wrote down the branch manager's name who set the in-branch only restriction on our HELOC, and taped the case numbers into my notebook like they were talismans. On Point gave me OPFR minus 44,192 for fraud watch on any ACH outflows. I set USPS informed delivery hold because mail tends to be where the next betrayal waits. The benevolent explanation I wanted sat right next to the ugly one at the table. Mara once fronted money for a co-worker whose ex weaponized fines and bills. She is the kind of person who unhooks dinner from her mouth when a patient wakes up at the wrong time. It would fit that she tried to solve someone else's midnight by making something complicated look simple. It would also fit that we were an inch from overdrawn last weekend, that she has said things like, overtime is the only math that makes sense. An honest person can cause harm with good intentions. That sentence is the kind you hope you never have to practice in your own house. At 7:05 a.m., I called the DMV hotline and suspended the title transfer case O.TT minus 27,701 flagged for in-person only with 2 ID, manager code JQ. I called Notarized Now and filed an affidavit that the signature was not mine NNFR minus 1,189 requesting the full audit trail including the verification steps used to bypass the code. I put a hold on our HELOC at On Point and set a personal PA, and only I knew because a car without a converter can still deliver problems. I made coffee I barely swallowed and watched fog from the river creep into our street like someone doing a shy apology. Long before 3:11 a.m. stole my van on paper. There were red flags I folded into hand towels and stacked neatly so I didn't have to see them. The mileage on the van would be 6 miles longer than our last errand when Mara arrived home after a shift she claimed had held her past midnight. The smell of someone else's dry sheets lived in her scrubs on days that she said she showered at the hospital because oHSU had installed new locker room stalls on 9K that made it easy. A second phone line appeared on our shared plan 2 months back with a number I didn't recognize. She said the airline credit card rewards had a promotion for extra lines. She said she was helping her sister in Boise, who we both knew didn't live in Boise anymore. The Hop Fast Pass app on her phone logged a tap at South Waterfront at 10:52 p.m. on a night she had texted she was charting in the break room. New season's receipts arrived in the app for lavender detergent and freezer waffles at 2:06 a.m. like dinner's exhausted cousin. I told myself shift work is a wolf that eats normal. I told myself our life was a logistics problem, not a story. Saturday brought the first public scene because birthdays don't care about the shape of your week. We were supposed to meet her parents for brunch at Bissell's in the Slabtown district. I brought the folder because I am a person now who brings folders to French toast. I laid out the DMV transfer, the DocuSign printout with the notarized now audit trail, the ring screenshots, the on-point foretold letter, and the USPS confirmation. I described my calls in a voice that stayed in its lane. Her father asked if this could be a glitch. He bent the word like he had hoped it would snap and free him from having to hold it. Her mother looked at Mara with the sort of quiet you only see when someone is choosing between fight and mercy. Mara looked at the table and then past it. I watched our server place a plate down like he was landing a particularly delicate plane. Mara later said the envelope had contained a consent form for an organ donation case that needed a witness. She said the South Waterfront and the time were because the oHSU tram is faster at night and the unit had been chaotic and the hospital has blind spots. She said she'd stopped at New Seasons for almond milk because she forgot we had some, and she said the rose was a joke the cashier insisted on when a customer leaves with nothing but milk and a haunted expression. She asked me to believe in her intent even while I documented her impact. I didn't tell her the notarized now had already sent me a system note from 2:56 a.m. with a line that said, "Code delivered to minus 4,811. My number ends in 4,810. Paper tends to make more paper." A welcome packet from a South Waterfront apartment complex called Cedar Quay arrived in our mailbox on Monday addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Carter for Unit 713. With 2 fobs and a parking pass, garage level P3. The envelope had our home address, the wrong middle initial for Mara, and my phone number off by 1 digit, a motif making itself at home. The lease copy inside showed my e-signature and a driver's license scan that looked like mine from 2 renewals ago. The lease start date was 10 days earlier. The deposit had posted via ACH from our joint account with a memo code that read like a sigh, CQD-P-713. My stomach did the neat trick of becoming very cold and very loud at once. I walked into Cedar Quay because sometimes making your fear wear shoes helps. The manager, a man who smiled like it was a policy, confirmed that Unit 713 had a lease with my name and Mara's, that 2 fobs had been activated, and that a short-term rental listing had been reported by a resident on a neighborhood forum. He asked if I wanted to update the emergency contact to someone local. He asked if the license on file needed to be rescanned because sometimes scans glare. I told him I'd be returning with a letter and a lawyer. He returned my smile with something like a receipt. The independent witness I didn't know I needed came from across the street. Our neighbor, Jenny, who babysits for 3 families on our block and runs the front of house 3 nights a week at a cafe on Division, knocked on our door with an apology and a notebook. She had seen Mara load 3 bins labelled the kitchen into a lift at 1:30 a.m. the week before and had written down the car's plate number because her mother raised her to collect details. She had watched a man she did not know carry my toolbox to the curb beside Mara's bins. She had taken a photo because she is 24 and that's how her generation decides the difference between a story and a rumour. A photo showed the toolbox my father gave me with the dent in the top from the time I taught myself how to make a shelf level in a house with opinions. The second public scene unfolded at oHSU because leaking tournaments of pin have their own rules. I scheduled a meeting with Human Resources and brought my folder and my ugliest com. I set out the DMV email, the DocuSign audit trail, the Cedar Quay lease and fob activation, the on-point case notes, the USPS confirmation, and the ring timestamps. I asked whether anyone at the hospital had notarized the title transfer in the past week under their employer-provided notary privileges and whether Kronos showed a shift swap on the night the notary session took place. The HR manager printed a verification letter for me that listed a swap log at 9:11 p.m. and an after-hours badge swipe onto 9K at 1:22 a.m., then a badge swipe out at 1:47. She did not include a judgment. The paper didn't need it. She also gave me a copy of the notary log for the week, which showed no DMV title transfers. The absences answered questions I hadn't wanted to pose. The drumbeat of Twistlow and my address. Wells Fargo's fraud department called to ask if I had opened a Chase Sapphire card because they had seen a large SEHO flow to Chase with our line of credit account number as the source. I had not. I froze the line again and received case WFFR-50,319. A city code enforcement letter arrived from Portland's Bureau of Development Services with the reference code SDR-UNP-2291, citing a complaint about an unpermitted short-term rental at Cedar Quay Unit 713 and reminding the listed owners my forged name among them of the fines that accrue per day. PGE welcome to power of confirmation for Unit 713 slid under our door with a meter number and a start date. Etsy sent me a heads up. New payout account alert I hadn't asked for. Someone had tried to switch my payout to a Chime account ending in 6,481. I put a lock on payouts and thanked every bad review I ever responded to with patience because the platform believed me when I said no. The storage unit revealed itself with the theatricality of a magician's scarf. A neon orange public storage fob fell out of Mara's canvas tote when I lifted it to clear space on the bench. The unit was on SE 17th and Hallgate, Unit M-311, rented under my business name. Security question answer matching the nickname only Mara uses for me when we are not performing for company. Inside, on the left wall, bins stacked neat linens, kitchen staples, a bundle of flat white boxes with the logo of a small batch soap company near Alberta. On the right wall, a folded metal bed frame, a second-hand West Elm sofa with the welt worn in one corner, a box labelled a welcome basket with individually wrapped granola bars and 3 Portland guide maps, and a laminated sheet that read House Manual for SE River Views Contact, E. Carter, followed by our home number written wrong by 1 digit. I lifted the manual and found beneath it a Fred Mayer receipt for 2 sets of keys and a small safe. I carried the manual back to my bench and put it next to the DMV printouts and the Cedar Quay fob's letter and the code enforcement notice. The pages looked like a set of strangers meeting at the bus stop. I wrote another letter to Mara because my body only knows how to be brave when holding a pen. I told her I had moved my business income entirely into the Advantage account and would handle the mortgage from there. I told her the HELOC was inaccessible pending in-person branch approval only. I listed case numbers like a man building a wall, O.TT-27,701, NNFR-1,189, OBFR-44,192, WFFR-50,319, STRUMP-2,291. I told her I had retained counsel file card RE-412 who would be sending a cease and desist to Cedar Quay and a demand letter re any leases or accounts open using my name or EIN. I added a single sentence stating that a DNA test would be arranged if there were any possibility of a child touched by these forms, not because I believed it, but because I had learned recently that you include provisions for storms even when the sky pretends to be kind. I hated the sentence as soon as I typed it and left it in. The third-party complication was Scrubs. A paramedic name pen had become a regular name in Mara stories months ago, neutral at first, then recurring in ways that attached to shift swaps and tram rides and dinners eaten in the one cafe that stays open past midnight in the South Waterfront. He had a child half the week, and an ex whose presence turned paperwork into puzzles. It would make sense that the Cedar Quay apartment existed partly because a toddler cannot be hauled up a tram at midnight and partly because a person with an ex on a custody schedule needs a place to say yes first and apologize later. It would also make sense that the house manual listed my name because someone needed to pretend a grown-up was responsible. All of these things could be true at once and still be wrong in a way that bit down hard. The microcatharsis came in a room I did not expect to breathe in. Cedar Quay's monthly resident meeting turned into a tribunal after the manager added short-term rentals compliance to the agenda. I stood in a corner because my knees were not interested in performing. The manager read the city's letter and reminded everyone that leases prohibit hosting without a permit. She asked if the named leaseholders were present. I raised my hand and said, without flourish, that my signature on the lease had been forged, and that I had brought the DMV transfer, the notary log absence, the code enforcement notice, and the public storage house manual with my wrong phone number as proof of the pattern. Residents who had smiled at each other in the elevator looked at me like they had discovered a genre of television they hadn't known they liked. The manager issued a formal cure or quit notice to Unit 713 with a 3-day clock, and she copied me on the email to the owner. The simple administrative click of the send button made my skin feel 2 sizes too small. The ugliest moment happened in a quieter room. I sat with Mara at our kitchen table while the dishwasher exhaled like a nap. She said she had rented the apartment because Ben's child needed a place to be on nights when the world ran late, and because she had wanted to sleep without the guilt of waking me at 4 a.m. She said she had put my name on the lease because she had been told 2 income sources would avoid a deposit amount she couldn't cover until payday. She said she had used our joint account to cover the initial payment and had planned to reimburse it from bookings that were supposed to stop in a month after the deposit returned from Ben's sublet. She said she had forged the DMV transfer because River City Tours paid cash for old vans, and she was going to replace mine with the used Sprinter when the Queen Bed client on Hawthorne paid their final invoice. She said stress had made her into a math who believed in itself too easily. She said words that I wish her out as pills because then you could read the side effects and choose. I told her, because the words wouldn't have it any other way, that intention is a poor accountant and that I would not continue as a ghost signature. I told her lawyers and case numbers are not weapons when used correctly, they are instructions. I posted a 3-line summary of my boundaries to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a salmon, separate finances effective immediately. No new accounts to be opened in my name by anyone. No leases, utilities, permits, or benefits to list either of us unless the person actually lives there. I added 2 others after breathing. No nurseries outside business hours with fluorescent lighting. No cash transfers explained by future plans. I texted Jenny and thanked her for being the person who writes down plates. I sent Cedar Quay and the city investigator our lawyer's contact information. I tried to eat something that tasted like doing my best. The aftermath refused to be polite. Cedar Quay voided the lease for fraud after the owner agreed that a forged signature is not a technicality. They returned the deposit to the account it had come from and referred the matter to their legal team. They issued a trespass notice for Ben, who had been caught on camera with a lockbox. They copied me on everything like they were including me in a family thread. The city closed the SDR complaint with the note SDR UMP minus 2,291 resolved after the listing disappeared and the unit emptied. The DMV required us to come in person to revalidate the title, and a clerk with kind eyes and a strict stamp added a note that any future title transfers would require manager's signature and 2 witnesses. Notarized now sent a report showing a 2-factor code routed to a Google Voice number that had been added to my profile at 2:53 a.m. Then removed at 3:04. The keystroke analysis said high likelihood of mimicry. On point out a day, branch only. Both parties must be present restriction to the HELOC, and wrote AR in red pen on our file, which looked so analog it nearly made me weep. The healthcare axis wound itself into the mess-like threads that happened to be nearby. The late-night New Seasons runs had been for cheap diapers and freezer waffles for Ben's child on half weeks and for electrolytes when the unit ate lunch. The lavender detergent was for sheets at Unit 713 and for scrubs. The red rose not a joke so much as a barred softness. My stress EKG did not like being near any of it. I added 20 minutes of walking the spring water corridor to my days like a prescription I chose. I want to say those walks made me into a kinder version of myself. The truth is they made me into a person who could stack both rage and paperwork without tipping. People ask the internet questions as if it were a judge. Here's mine, and I have passed it around the world inside my skull for weeks. Would you insist on ending a marriage for this, leaving a person who tried to solve problems with illegal rentals and forged signatures and a lie about a lease because trust is a spine and spines do not like to bend? Or would you take the person's hand and say, we will learn how to ask for permission and forgive ourselves for thinking that courage means impersonation? Would you change the locks on your life, or change the rules and stand there to see who follows them? We did not go to a courthouse. We went to a counsellor off Belmont who keeps a bowl of peppermint candies on a table that has healed more couples than it has supported coffee mugs. We wrote rules that read like a customs declaration. Mara moved into the 2nd bedroom for a month and made it into a monastic routine: work, sleep, edible things, calendar. She paid back the deposit from her next 2 paychecks and asked payroll to split them automatically into 2 accounts so temptation could be embarrassed before it introduced itself. She wrote a letter to Cedar Quay apologizing for turning their building into a plot point. She sent a message to Ben saying she would not be able to help him solve his life by turning ours into a paper cut. She attached the city code link like a person who has learned that facts beat feelings only when emailed. She registered for a budgeting app like a teenager learning the price of bagels. I still keep a folder in the safe with everything from that week. The DMV notice, the DocuSign audit trail with the Google Voice addition and deletion, the notary vendor's keystroke analysis that proved my signature could be copied and still not be mine, the Cedar Quay lease and cure quit notice, the Bureau of Development Services letter, the public storage manual, the on-point fraud flags, and the cases scrolled in the top right corner of each page. Sometimes I open it because my body has learned to believe paper more than sentences. Sometimes I don't because my body has learned that paper can be a bully too. Stability has a new sound. It is the squeak of the basement step I keep meaning to fix, the way the dryer complains about towels, the burr of my orbital sander on a walnut slab for a couple in Laurelhurst who still hold hands while measuring things. Jenny waves across the street and asks if we want strawberries from her night shift that we're going to get composted. The MAX hums the same note at 10 p.m. as it does at 3 a.m. The spring water corridor smells like wet cedar. I am still a man who checks his Ring app before he falls asleep and sometimes when he wakes because you cannot unteach yourself vigilance. I am still a man who will print a receipt and put it next to another until the pattern spells meaning. Every once in a while, around 3:11 a.m., my phone glows against the ceiling and I expect the DMV or some other black-lettered god to tell me what part of my life has been refiled. Usually it is nothing an Etsy sale to a buyer in Bend, a late comment on a shelf photo, a try-met delay notification that means someone's morning will be scrambled eggs instead of an omelette. The light still feels like a warning anyway. I get up and walk to the front window, and the street looks the same as it always does at that hour. Blue bins lined up like polite robots, a cat deciding whether all this is worth it, fog where the river supervises, and the Ring doorbell's tiny staring eye. I think about the van, still mine, still scarred under the belly but with a new catalytic converter I guard more fiercely than my childhood. I think about the apartment, empty now, and the people who will move into it and give it a story that doesn't include laminated manuals printed at my bench. I think about the kid who ate freezer waffles at midnight and did not ask for any of this. I think about Mara, asleep in the second bedroom she made into penance, breathing like someone who has given herself permission to keep trying. I think about the geography of forgiveness and the way boundaries draw maps we can actually read. There's a version of me that would have sent one more email, collected one more case number, pronounced the sentence on our life like a judge who never eats breakfast. There is the version of me standing here instead, in a house that leans a little, making rules sharp enough to keep us safe and soft enough to keep us human. There is my name, which I keep like a tool in a drawer that I organize now with a ferocity that embarrasses me. There's the light on the ceiling, painted by the phone that betrayed me and saved me in equal measure, and the tiny mechanical bird on our porch that pretends to be a camera and sometimes decides it is.